Kalen had many talents. Watering plants, as it turned out, was not among them. He discovered this the hard way at approximately 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, when the front gates of Archmagus Valdrin's estate swung open, and out stepped the most furious and, Kalen noted with deeply unfortunate timing, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Lyra Valdrin had her father's sharp grey eyes and none of his patience. She was 20 years old, freshly graduated from the Valdrin Academy of Arcane Arts, and she was staring at a very dead plant. Her plant, the moon bloom she'd spent 3 summers coaxing from a seed the size of a ferninail. "What," she said, her voice dangerously soft, "happened to my moon bloom?" It wasn't a question. Questions had hope in them. Kalen, leaning on his rake with the casual confidence of a man who did not yet understand the magnitude of his situation, opened his mouth. "Funny story, actually." Funny. She turned. The morning sun caught her dark hair. Kalen's brain briefly stopped functioning. "I've been covering the East Garden this week," he said. Bron twisted his ankle. "The moon bloom is on the West T-Rick, and look, I meant to get to it Thursday. It's Saturday." The days blurred together. Lyra looked at him the way experienced mages looked at things they were about to turn into something unpleasant. Kylan was fairly tall, reasonably built, and had a face that had talked him out of trouble with impressive frequency over his 22 years. The face was not helping today. "You," she said, walking toward him one slow step at a time, "have been the gardener here for how long?" 2 years. And in 2 years, you have somehow never learned that the moon bloom requires water every 3 days. "I knew that. I simply failed to apply the knowledge. That's one way to." "You're fired." The word landed like a dropped stone. Kalen blinked. "Pardon?" "Collect your things. I'll have your wages sent to wherever it is you go." She was already turning away, dismissing him the way people dismissed weather. "And don't touch anything else on your way out. I don't need you accidentally killing the hedgerows." He should have said something gracious. He was, when he chose to be, a gracious person. "It's one plant," he said instead. She stopped. "One plant," she repeated, not turning around. "An accident. I've kept this entire garden alive for 2 years. The roses won a city prize last spring." Now she turned around. The grey eyes were doing something complicated. "The roses won a prize because I sent instructions from the academy on how to treat the blight. You followed them adequately." Adequately. The word hit somewhere south of his pride. "Your bags," she said. Now. By noon, Kalen was on the road east with everything he owned in a pack on his back. 3 changes of clothes, a knife, 17 copper marks, and a bruised ego that was somehow heavier than all of it combined. He had not, he told himself, liked working for the Valdrin estate anyway. The grounds were too formal, the other staff too cautious. The pay was decent, but the work was beneath a man of his. Thunder cracked across a sky that had been perfectly clear 20 minutes ago. The clouds, apparently, had opinions about his monologue. The rain came down like it was making a personal point. Kalen pulled his collar up, swore colourfully, and started looking for anywhere that wasn't open sky. The road curved through sparse woodland, and about a 1/4 mile in, the dark mouth of a shallow cave opened in the hillside like an afterthought. He ducked in, dripping, furious. "Fired," he muttered at the cave wall. Adequately. He picked up a stone. One. Plant. He threw it hard at the rock face. The wall cracked, crumbled. A shelf of limestone the size of a door panel slid down in a rush of dust and old air. And there, sealed inside the hollow behind it, like a very grim surprise, was a human skeleton. Kalen stared. The skeleton stared back, in the way that skeletons do, which is without blinking and with tremendous commitment. It was old. Centuries, maybe. The clothes had dissolved to suggestion, but on the 3rd finger of the right hand, a ring sat perfectly intact, a slim band of dark metal, threaded through with a faint, pulsing hum that Kalen could feel in his back teeth. He crouched, looked at it for a long moment. "Don't," said his better judgment. He took the ring. It slid onto his finger like it had been waiting. The hum became a roar, and then the cave, the skeleton, the rain outside, All of it snapped into focus around him with a precision so sudden and complete it made him gasp. He could feel the walls, not see, feel. Every crack, every stone, the water moving in the rock above. The skeleton's hollow chest, the exact distance to the cave mouth, 3 meters, 40 centimeters. The ring flared. A faint blue shimmer bloomed around his hand, cool and silent, like light through deep water. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the world folded. The cave mouth rushed toward him without him taking a step, the damp stone walls smearing past in a streak of blue-white. And then he was standing outside in the rain, soaking wet, staring back into the dark hollow where he'd just been standing. He hadn't moved his legs. His stomach lurched, his knees hit the mud. He threw up. Right, he managed, wiping his mouth. So that's a thing. The ring hummed, patient and warm, against his finger. He straightened up slowly, breathing through the tail end of the dizziness, and turned back to look at the cave, at the skeleton, at the hollow in the wall it had been tucked inside so very, very neatly. The hollow that was exactly the size and shape of a man. Kylan stood very still for a moment. The ring's spatial sense was still murmuring to him, the shape of every surface, every solid thing within reach. It was extraordinarily precise. He could feel the rough texture of the cave ceiling, the density of the rock, the way the wall behind the skeleton was a full meter thick before it opened to the hillside beyond. He thought about how the cave had been sealed when he arrived. No door, no passage, just rock, solid and continuous, from floor to ceiling. He thought about a man, some other man, centuries ago, who had perhaps been in a hurry, or overconfident, or simply hadn't yet understood that the ring needed you to feel the space before you moved through it. That if your sense of the destination was even slightly off, if you misjudged a wall's depth by a foot, if you reached for a point just beyond a door you thought was open, the previous owner hadn't been buried in the cave wall. He'd teleported into it. Oh, Kalen said quietly. He looked at the ring on his finger. The ring looked back in the way that magical artifacts do, which is with complete indifference to the fragility of the person wearing them. Right, he said again, with considerably more weight than the first time. So I need to be very, very careful about where I'm pointing this thing. He turned back to the cave mouth, watching the rain hammer the road. The spatial sense stretched ahead of him without prompting. He could feel the ditch at the road's edge, the oak tree 10 meters out, the gap between 2 boulders further up the path. Everything clean and clear and precisely mapped. As long as he could feel it, he could reach it safely. The moment he stopped paying attention, stopped knowing where he was going, he'd be decorating a wall from the inside. Kalen exhaled slowly. Then, despite himself, a grin pulled at the corner of his mouth. So, the ring rewarded careful attention and punished arrogance. In that sense, it was almost a metaphor for something. He'd have to think about what. Later, when he wasn't standing in a cave next to a cautionary skeleton in the rain. Outside, the road led east, toward the city of Denvara, toward opportunity, toward the kind of life that didn't include raking leaves for people who used the word adequately. Kalen sat back on his heels, looked at the ring, and felt something shift in his chest. Not the nausea, something else, something that felt with startling clarity like a plan. The first rule Kalen worked out on his own. Know exactly where you're going, not approximately, not more or less. The ring didn't do more or less. It did precise, or it did catastrophic, and the skeleton in the wall was a fairly persuasive argument for staying on the right side of that line. He started small, a meter, then 3, then the length of the cave and back and forth until the dizziness stopped being dizziness and started being something closer to rhythm. Each jump announced itself the same way. A soft pulse from the ring, a breath of blue shimmer curling around his forearm like smoke off still water, and then the fold, a lurch of compressed space, a smear of cold light, and he'd be somewhere else with both feet under him. By the 20th jump, the nausea was gone entirely. By the 30th, he was getting impatient. He pushed the range. 5 meters, 10, 20, out into the rain and back, the blue vortex blooming, and collapsing faster each time, the shimmer tightening from a lazy swirl to a sharp, focused ring of light that barely lasted half a second before the jump swallowed it. The sense stretched ahead of him like fingers feeling a dark room, mapping every stone and puddle and route before he committed. It was almost musical. The ring hummed. He listened. The blue flared and died, and he moved. Simple. Then the caravan appeared on the road below. 4 wagons, a dozen travelers, 2 guards on horses. Kalen watched from the tree line with idle curiosity as his sense swept automatically outward and then stopped being idle entirely. The ring, it turned out, did not make distinctions between solid objects on the basis of what was polite to notice. There were 3 women in the caravan. Kalen's ears went red. He looked sharply at a tree. The tree was very uninteresting, but he studied it with tremendous focus for a solid 10 seconds while he had a brief internal conversation about the kind of man he was and the kind of man he intended to be. He reached a diplomatic compromise. He would be aware that the ring's perception was comprehensive, file that information carefully away, and get moving. He arrived in Denvara at dusk, damp, bright-eyed, and walking with the loose, easy stride of someone who had recently discovered he could step through space like other men stepped through doorways. The city smelled of coal smoke and river water and fried things. Torches were coming on in the tavern windows. Somewhere a fiddle was playing badly and someone was enjoying it anyway. Kalen stood at the city gate, the ring warm on his finger, and thought about a certain family vault he knew the rough location of. Adequately, Lyra Valdrin had said. He smiled. Not for long. Getting back to the Valdrin estate took 2 hours on foot and 0 seconds through the garden wall. He'd felt the wall's thickness from 15 meters out, solid granite, a meter wide, and found the gap in his sense where the flower bed on the other side sat open and clear. The ring flared blue at his knuckles, a thin vortex of cold light spinning briefly, in the dark, and then he was through it, standing silently among the rose beds. The granite wall, solid and unbroken behind him, as if he'd simply appeared from nothing, which, he supposed, he had. His roses, thank you very much. Prize-winning. He crouched among them and let his sense sweep the grounds. 2 guards on the front gate, one doing rounds near the stables, none near the east wing where the family kept things worth keeping. The vault itself was underground, warded 6 ways from Sunday, and well beyond him for now. But the study on the 2nd floor had a display cabinet he'd dusted approximately 300 times. He knew every piece in it by heart. He found the study window from the courtyard below, dark glass, latched from inside, no problem. The ring mapped the empty space behind it, a meter of floorboard, then a writing desk, then clear air to the cabinet. The blue vortex flared briefly at his knuckles, and he stepped through the glass, the latch and the wall all at once, landing without a sound on the floorboards inside. The cold night air of the courtyard already gone, and the study's stillness around him. The ring mapped every floorboard's density, so his feet found only the silent ones as he crossed to the cabinet. The cabinet held a gold candlestick as long as his forearm, a brooch set with 3 river-green gemstones, and a small locked box inlaid with brass that he'd always been told not to touch. He took all 3, obviously. He was tucking the box under his arm and already mapping his exit. Rosebeds below, then the wall, then the road, when the door opened. Lyra stood in the doorframe in a dressing gown, a candle in one hand, and a wand in the other, clearly having come for a late-night book. For one long, crystalline moment, neither of them moved. The ring mapped her in the dark with unhelpful thoroughness. Kalen kept his expression neutral through an act of genuine heroism. "Hello," he said pleasantly. Her eyes went to the candlestick under his arm, then back to his face. The wand came up. He winked. The blue vortex spun up around his hand, faster now, tighter, barely a flicker, and the windowsill disappeared. One jump put him back in the rosebeds, the candlestick tucked under his arm and the cold night air rushing in to replace the study's warmth. A second jump took him through the garden wall, solid granite, there one instant and behind him the next, and he landed on the grass verge of the road outside. A third carried him 20 meters further east, boots hitting packed dirt, the stolen goods pressed against his. chest and his heart hammering with something that was mostly adrenaline and only a little bit something else. Each jump left a brief ghost of blue light hanging in the air behind him, a faint, shimmering smear that faded within seconds, like breath on cold glass. Behind him, back at the estate, he heard a single sharp crack, a wand striking a window frame in frustration. Then Lyra's voice, clear and carrying in the night air. "I will find you." Kalen grinned at the dark road ahead. He believed her completely. He found, to his own surprise, that he didn't mind at all.